Welcome everyone, my name is Manuel Martinez, and this is another episode of Career Downloads. For today's episode, I have with me Jesse Taylor. He and I have connected on a number of different events. We're both part of SIM. There's a little bit of background around that in the organization and how that came to be. Also a lot of progression within his career. Just like many of the other guests, we've had a lot of intersections. So I'm very excited for this conversation. And with that, I'll introduce Jesse.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on and making the time to kind of share your experiences.
I love to be here. It sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So I saw a bunch of fun. I'm like, everybody else is doing the podcast. What about me?
What about me? Right?
Yeah.
I got some cool stories.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know you, if you don't mind kind of just telling us a little bit about your current role and what are some of the responsibilities?
Sure. I'm currently the Senior Manager of Cloud and Systems Engineering at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so my team works on server virtualization, storage, server infrastructure, all the things in regards to enterprise IT and under the scenes, behind the scenes.
Got it. And I know that you work with, we've had Vito on here,
Oh, yeah.
so I know that you guys kind of work together.
He's
So again, this is
He's a
where
good guy.
some of those conversations where, again, we know a lot of the same people, we interact at a lot of the same events. So again, I'm excited and to get to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, it's interesting because the community is very small in Southern Nevada, and it's everybody knows everybody. Like, remember the whole Kevin Bacon? Like, was it
The 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah, like everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, and so but our community is very strong as well. That's the cool thing about Southern Nevada is just that our community is so well put together with so many different personalities and talents and skills that it's a really awesome place to be right now.
It is, and I think that extends outside of just tech, right? So we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about tech, definitely. And definitely within the tech industry, we're probably 2 degrees of separation, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure there's somebody that
Oh,
I
yeah.
know, and outside of that, even from a personal standpoint. So again, I've talked about this before, being born and raised here. My wife used to joke when we were dating, she's like, can we go somewhere and you not know somebody? And I was like, it's a small, again,
Yeah.
Southern Nevada is a little bit smaller than most people realize. Like, sure, it's 1 million something, if you count Henderson and all these different areas, but it is a very close-knit community.
Right. It's my wife was born here, and so I'm actually from California, but it's she's seen it grow from being on Maryland Parkway where her parents had an apartment to this sprawling, huge metropolitan area now.
Yeah. So perfect. So you came from California. So now, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about kind of where you grew up, and what you thought you might do as a career, as a young Jesse.
Young Jesse had a lot of ideas, but so I'm originally from Napa, California. So where the wine flows through the streets, and no, it doesn't do that.
It doesn't do that yet.
No, it's actually a really cool place to grow up. It's 74 all year round. Sunny, rain in April and May. But really, the thing about Napa though is it was really designed. It's really either you're in tourism, or you're in the wine industry of some type, or hospitality. That's kind of it. I mean, you can go into San Francisco, or you can go into Up Valley, et cetera, to get roles that are different than that. But at a very young age, I kind of fell in love with computers. I remember walking into the computer lab as a kindergartner, little guy, walking up to an Apple IIe, and putting in the 5 1/4 floppy and firing up Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
And playing that with my friends, and we always get to halfway through the game, and then the bell would ring, and we had to end it. It was just disaster. But
that's if you didn't die of dysentery first,
right? And once in a while, if you hit all the right buttons, you can get all the way to the end. But but that was really where I fell in love with the concept of, hey, what can a computer do? Fast forward through middle school to end of my 8th grade year. I my parents had purchased a clone PC. From back in the 90s, it was like you could buy a Dell or an HP or an IBM or Compaq.
Yeah.
But you can get a clone PC for a lot less, and basically with small mom and pop computer shops. They're still around, not as many as they used to be. But it was a case, logic board, CPU, RAM, etc. Copy of Windows 3.11 for work groups, because that was awesome back then. But my parents bought one in I think it was 5th or 6th grade. I remember just spending a lot of time on it. My dad always said he's not playing baseball, I don't think. But 8th grade year, I broke it terribly. I was trying to learn, and I had everything from remember the For Dummies books? It's still around.
Yeah.
I had DOS for Dummies, and I read the book from front to back several times. I tried reinstalling Windows, and I couldn't get. This is early on in my career. I couldn't get the CD-ROM drive to load back up. I couldn't get this driver loaded because it's just something I hadn't learned, and it really wasn't anywhere that I had read. And this is before the time of the internet, so you couldn't just pull up your phone or and Google this and find it. That didn't exist. And so we took it in the computer store. It was again a mom and pop store, and my parents were not very happy with the fact that they're having to pay for a repair on how to fix this thing. And we get the computer, and about a week later, we get the computer back. And as I'm going to pick up the computer, the service manager behind the desk is like, "Hey, you've got an aptitude. We saw some of the things you've done to the software. You have an aptitude for this. Do you want a summer job?" And I said, "Yeah." And so I ended up working there throughout the summer. And this is the summer that Windows 95 was released. So I got to see a beta version before that was available to the store as get ready for this type of deal. But I got to learn from everything from putting the logic board in the case and putting the posts down and getting the CPU on there and making sure the fans are correct and the right type of RAM and making sure you're doing. Back then you had to do, depending on what kind of computer it was, paired RAM, et cetera, et cetera. Installing a hard disk, getting the Molex connectors in the back, et cetera. All that fun stuff. And started doing it working with them to build computers for clients. Some of the clients were some of the wineries up Valley. And it was just a really cool experience. I got to learn the hardware and software piece of technology. I take those skills, and my family decides that they're going to move to Las Vegas because my dad worked for the Department of Defense, and the BRAC closures in 93, 94 is where a bunch of military bases around the world closed, and they were a consolidation. So, in order for my dad to keep his retirement, we picked up from Napa, California, and moved to Las Vegas because Nellis is out here. So Dad was able to keep his retirement, and ended up kind of just keeping those skills and continuing to develop my skill set. Moving into to high school, of course, I joined the computer club because
right,
kids not playing baseball.
But you still got to make friends and kind of learn how to work with people, right?
It was a really cool experience for me because I got to basically help set up labs and work with instructors to get their requirements and repair things. My wife and I didn't meet in high school, but she went to the same high school. And she remembers seeing me walking around in classrooms and doing stuff and who is this guy? Little did she know that she'd be marrying me, years later. But it was, for me, it was thrilling though, because I got a chance to really hone those skills. And I wasn't really a programmer. I was more of an infrastructure, person. We had a lab that was a bunch of, remember the Mac, I think it was Performas, or maybe it was, it was a Power Macs.
Yes.
And they was running Warcraft, and they were all networked. And that lab was just on fire for kids after school because the instructor was perfectly cool with them firing up. We had 30 or 40 copies of Warcraft. It was all licensed, et cetera. They got to play Warcraft against their friends. This was this was before, you could go home and hook up your PlayStation and get on the internet and do the same thing. But, take those skills. And really, from that point forward, I was really trying to get into a little bit of helping family and friends out, just like we all kind of do in that realm. And then I would say, oh gosh, it was probably right after high school. I finished high school. Apple was opening up their first retail store in fashion show. And I had been looking for some part-time work when I was in college. And I said, well, I'll give this a shot. I've never had a Mac before, and a lot of people that are watching this are probably gonna be like, really? Because I'll explain a lot later.
Well, and then it makes sense, right? Because when you started on Windows, like kind of that PC, I think most of us that kind of were tinkerers, at least at that point in time, it was PC, right? It was the Windows was more dominant and more prevalent.
Well, it was less expensive to put together a Windows PC and I remember before I get too far along, I remember going to Comdex. Do you remember Comdex in Vegas?
I do, yes.
And being in high school and going up to Microsoft booth, and they would pass out like time limited software. So like I had a copy of Windows 2000 in beta, whatever it was perfectly licensed, legal, and they were just handing out like, go develop, go have fun. And so I had Windows 2000 before a majority of folks. I had NT4 loaded too, but that was really fun because I got to basically explore new features before they're out in the market, and be able to understand as I'm going into college courses what's up and coming. But going back to Apple, I ended up applying, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to work, because it was like 6 months later. I finally get a phone call. Hey, come down to I think it was the Palms, and the manager of the store would like to meet you. I met with her. We chatted. I got a call back a few weeks later saying, hey, we'd like to offer you part-time work, which is perfect because I was in college and that worked out perfectly. And I started training a few weeks later. And after that, we opened the store in late 2021, I want to say. It's been a little while since I thought about it.
Right. And being able to kind of go through and interview, right? You're a college student, you're young, but do you think that the experience of kind of working earlier and just, again, them identifying that you had an aptitude, like, okay, this isn't a kid that's just sitting there doing his work or playing and then he's done. Like, it was the tinkering. Is that what kind of made you say, all right, well, I don't know Apple, I don't have this, I'm going to apply for that because I have an aptitude for learning something different. You have this experience with going to Comdex and getting like these advanced copies of different software and saying like, hey, you know what? I like being
on the edge.
I don't want to say cutting edge is probably the way, or just like, hey, I want to know the latest and greatest.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it, because it was, for me, it was also, I had used Macs in school before then, so I had a little bit of familiarity. But I always felt the Apple technology was cutting edge. And so Windows had some cutting edge stuff too, because gaming was a big thing on the PC, and that became bigger and bigger as time went on. And so I started and did my first it was a sales role. So I was a specialist, they used to call them. But they really showed me how to listen. I think that's one of the biggest lessons I received from that training, was how to listen to someone's needs, evaluate those needs, and then work towards a solution that worked for them, that wasn't that was the right solution, right sized. It wasn't too much or too little. It was right size. If they wanted expansion, sure, a little bit more. That skill has served me well throughout my entire career, because the art of listening is something that I think is lost in a lot of places,
And like the listening, is it the skill of not only listening, but trying to translate, right? Because a lot of these people may or may not be technical. They know what they want, or they have an idea. Like they might just tell you like, well, I need a PC and I do this stuff. So it's listening, but then there's also kind of that like asking more questions and being able to translate and say, okay, well what type of work are you doing on it? You mentioned expansion, right? Like you want to get them something right, but if you see that there might be the chance you don't want to give them something that they're going to outgrow fast, because again, sure, that might make for another sale, but it may not always be the best customer experience.
Right, and that was really important to me, is making sure the customer was extremely happy with whatever they purchased, and also for me, it was you really want to build trust. Something that Laura Fucci once told me. Laura used to be the CIO of Henderson, and she's retired now. But it's all about trust when it comes to sales, making sure you're dependable, trustworthy, and that's one of the things that I always tried to exhibit as well, as building confidence with the organizations that I've worked with. Hey, we're going down the right path. Here's the reasons why, and let me go ahead and take what your needs are. What are you trying to do? And this is something, and later on in life, this comes back up for me. But what problem are you trying to solve?
Right.
Is the problem that you think is the problem really the problem, or is it a wider expansion of, what are your outcomes you're trying to achieve? And that's something I've always tried to do with my career, is figure out what kind of problem we're trying to solve and then find the right solution to move us forward.
Right. And not just be distracted by features and functionality. And I'm sure, especially they're like, oh, I saw this advertisement and I want this because of, it's the latest and greatest, it's the new model, and I want the high-end one. Okay, the high-end may be too much expansion, right? Like, I get it. You do that one, it might last you because it's maxed out on memory and storage, and sure, it'll last you a long time, but are you still maybe over purchasing for even your 5-year needs?
Yeah, my goal is always to say, hey, well, if you're just doing spreadsheets and surfing the web, we probably don't need to do this type of a setup. And that's something, again, it goes back to right sizing and figuring out what they actually need. And what I've found is the more you help them understand that and get buy-in to what solution you're moving towards, they're more apt to continue that relationship in regards to moving. Hey, you helped me out one time with this. I've come back and I have this problem now. How do I expand what I have, or how do I get something else that makes sense to do what I need to do?
Right. No, and that's a valuable skill to learn, especially that early on. Like, I can't say that I probably developed some of that just working like in a help desk capacity, right? Because there you have to learn to ask questions, right? Like, you're telling me something, I can't see it. Is the problem you're describing really the problem, or do you just not know how to communicate? Again, not everybody's technical, right? Sometimes I'm dealing with the food and beverage people, right? And they're just like, hey, this doesn't work. They're explaining stuff to you, but at the same time, they don't know. So it's understanding that question and, trying to figure out what's really the problem. Like, hey, this doesn't work. Well, is it this, or is there really something bigger?
Yeah. I think everyone in their career should work retail once. I think they should really go do a summer job, working with people it will change your perspective on how you should treat people and how you want to be treated when it comes to just those interactions. Because those people skills are super important, and they will carry throughout your entire career. Especially being able to read the emotions somebody has, being able to read maybe the inflection in their speech, maybe able to see that they're making eye contact or not making eye contact. Are they being? Is there words that are in there? Is there a problem that they keep going back to? Mm-hmm. And how do I work through that?
And it's funny the timing on this, because I had seen a post by a previous guest. So Parmjeet mentioned that where she had gone to somewhere, and I guess it was a newer employee, and just that experience, right? I guess they had gone to a speakeasy, and that same time I read that post, me and my son had gone shopping. And again, this was, a younger girl who came in, but when we sat down, like, she saw him and I talking, and I think she asked me for my email, right? And I just happened to say, and it had part of a vehicle in there. She's like, hey, is that what you have? So again, just understanding, like, hey, this is something that I can talk to. Maybe I never see her again, but she, in that moment, made that experience, it made it memorable for me, and it elevated. Whereas, like, hey, we're coming in, we were just shopping, getting him, some jeans and stuff like that, and now she's talking to us, and we're like, oh yeah, this is great. And she also, like you said, was able to read, because nobody was behind us. Like, we were waiting, there's 2 or 3 people in line. By the time we came, she was able to have that interaction, because she's like, well, there's nobody here. Yeah. Whereas in the previous ones, I could still see that she's talking to them, but it's a little bit shorter conversation. And that's a transferable skill that will...
Everywhere. Prioritization, figuring out how you can help, how how do I solve the problem in front of me? Which, it's not a problem. Well, not really a problem, but you know what I mean. How do I solve the situation that I'm in? How do I make it better for everyone?
Right.
That's a huge skill. So that was a blast. It was a lot of fun. I got to be there for some of the iPod launches, which were always, the lines out the door. But it's a very memorable. It's a really good time in my life. Doing that. So.
And as you're, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but as you're building this skill, you're doing this part-time, you mentioned you were going to college. What did you pursue as part of that?
Sure. So in college, I started off actually at CSN, believe it or not, as for just to build up some credits, transfer to UNLV. It was a way of kind of just easing myself into college. And I think I declared there like it was I think it might have been computer science or information systems, and but eventually ended up at UNLV going towards an MIS degree. So I did that while I was working at Apple. Yeah.
And curious, at that time, and I think we were there around the same time, that the two kind of dominant tech careers were computer science and MIS.
Yeah.
What made you choose those two? The reason I ask is when I went computer science. This is it. I started going through some of those classes and understanding what some of the prereqs were, and then also what you would be doing. I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. That doesn't sound like what I want to do. Like, I don't want to program chips, and I don't want to have to take, calculus 5. Like, cool. That's spelling at that point, right? Like, we're not doing math, we're spelling.
It's funny. I remember I got to UNLV and I ran into some friends of mine, and we were sitting there and talking from high school. And we're talking about what we declared as majors. And at the time, I still hadn't declared MIS as my major, but my friend goes, "What do you want to do?" And I'm like, "Well, obviously technology, something, but I kind of want to stay with strategy. I want to stay with planning. I want to stay with building things and working with people and finding out what their needs are." It ties back to what I was kind of doing. And he's like, "Well, have you ever thought about MIS?" And I said, "I'll look into that." And I did, and I declared. It was an interesting experience for me because I actually didn't graduate with an MIS degree. I know everybody's shocked when I say that.
Yeah, not what I expected. So yeah, definitely.
I ended up graduating with an interdisciplinary degree, which mixed business and public administration. Yeah, I have a lot of credits for MIS, but I don't have an MIS degree.
And what prompted that change?
It was mostly to do with, well, at the time, long story short, we have a lot. I know we're on a video cast. Long story. My girlfriend at the time, which is my wife now, had come down with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she's fine. She's in remission, all that good stuff. So but the other thing was, I was traveling a lot. I was CTO of Niche Media by the time I left UNLV, and I was traveling a ton. And the business college at the time really didn't have a lot of courses that were online. And so I used the credits that I have, and I basically built an interdisciplinary degree with business and public administration.
Got it. So then during your college career, it sounds like the Apple retail one led into this media company. So did it switch to you were working, you mentioned at first it was a part-time job. Did it become a part-time school, full-time job? Was it 50-50? Like, what did that, how did that come about? Like, how did you find out about this role?
Yeah, before I moved, so when I went full-time at Apple before I left Apple, and I was there for a couple of years as they called it a key holder, which basically meant that I was like underneath the assistant store manager, could open and close the store, resolve issues when the manager wasn't available, et cetera. And then after that, I was still in college, and I left and went to go work for the Art Institute. So I don't know if you remember they used to be up at Henderson. They used to be as our art college. Mm-hmm. It's not around anymore. EDMC was a big corporation. And I worked, so an old friend of mine from Apple had moved there, and I went to work with him. as a technician, so technician level 2. And we basically ran computer labs, but they're all Apple labs. So I had like a whole campus full of Apple labs, and we had it down to a science. We had NetBoot going, we had everything imaging properly. It was awesome because we were using all the things that Apple had for management, we were using. And it was like a lab for us. And the students loved it because everything worked all the time. And we had some PCs in the administrative offices, and took care of those too. After that, about 2 years after that, I saw that Vegas.com had an opening. And Vegas.com used to be the IT shop for all the Greenspun Corporation companies. That was it, because they had the website Vegas.com, and it's Vegas.com still around. And they were looking for somebody who had Apple experience doing Macintosh Enterprise, Apple Enterprise stuff. Hey, here I am. Yeah. And I'm like, this is like a great role. So I applied for it, interviewed, ended up getting the role. And I remember walking into the offices, they're like, okay, so you're signing your paperwork over here, but you're actually walking across the street to the Greenspun Media Group. And that's where the Las Vegas Sun, all the magazines that they had at the time, the huge magazine portfolio, because they had graphic designers over there and copy editors and reporters, and they were 100% Macintosh. So I got to deploy some Xserves, which is a heck of a lot of fun, and do Open Directory and Active Directory together. And so they used to call it the Magic Triangle. There's different there's different things they used to call it, but basically you had authentication from AD, and then you had Open Directory doing enforcement policies like GPOs basically for Mac, because they didn't Mac OS rather. And that was just a blast for me, because I got to do things that I hadn't gotten to do anywhere else, which was we had a room full of people doing graphic design all day long, InDesign, and then we had all this Windows infrastructure and a NetApp. And my role was to basically get that stuff to work with the enterprise stack. And I had a ton of fun because they let me experiment with figuring out ways to do things. I worked with the team there, still very close to everybody on that team that was there. And we got to build some really cool, they had a hard time getting single sign-on working. We got that working. I introduced them to imaging. We got imaging working across. I deployed. We had a project where we replaced a bunch of Solaris sun rays. Sun Microsystem sun rays, which are really, and the whole newsroom had them. And we're all iMac in there. So it was like 30 or something on iMacs. And I had gotten NetBoot running and NetRestore. And so I built that. This is back in monolithic imaging. Basically, you create an image and you copy the image out. Was prevalent. It's not really as much, not anymore. It doesn't think you do anymore. You can, but it's not really done that much. And we set them all up. I made sure they're online. I NetBooted them, and I think it was less than a day we had them up and running, because we stored the image and they're good to go. Okay. And the Windows side of the house couldn't do that. I could with Ghost, but not like that.
Right. Wow.
So.
And, as part of that, how much of that did you already have prior knowledge, kind of working at the arts place and kind of learn it?
Yeah.
So is that something at the art studio with your friend? Did you guys figure that out? Was he teaching you? I'm just curious. Yeah, how did you develop that?
He went into it first, and he left Apple first and went over to Art Institutes and basically self-taught himself how to do all these things. And then he showed me the resources he had used to teach himself. And then I went to him and I paired up, and I got to learn all those skills from him, but also from the Apple training materials. And I knew a little bit about it already from the core desktop stuff and some of the server stuff I already kind of knew from working at Apple. But when I got out in the field, they had all this wonderful training material. I got to basically experiment with it all there. And then when I went over to Vegas.com, I got to basically, for the Greenspun Media Group, again, they're the IT company for them, I got to basically put it in production.
Right. Yeah, no, and the reason I ask is it's interesting because there's the different elements, right? Is just starting early on, it's a lot of self-taught, and then there's kind of the training at Apple, and then over here, it sounded like it was a combination of both. There's some training, but then there's also some of the self-taught. So now kind of getting to this Greenspun Media, just understanding, and it's more for like people watching and listening. It's like, hey, similar in my career, there's portions that you have to teach yourself. There's portions where somebody will probably train you fully, and then there's other ones where they might just give you guidance. Like, so there's a mixture of that, and I wanted to make sure that what I thought was happening really was the case. Is like, hey, it's really a mixture of both, and it's not always a progression. It's like, well, I had to start by myself, then I got some kind of training, then I got full training, and then that's it. It's depending on the role, depending on the organization, it could be one, the other, or a mixture of them.
Yeah, for me, I picked up pieces along the way everywhere. That's part of one of the things that because I was specializing in Apple Enterprise, which isn't a common thing. It is in some parts of the country, but not in Vegas. I really had to pick up the pieces from wherever I could find them. Luckily, the internet was a huge, at that point in juncture, hey, web browsers, we got the web, and we're Google, and we're good to go. And so there was more people posting online about what they were doing, and a lot of colleges, universities had Apple in an infrastructure, and this leads to where I am now. And one thing I did pick up too at working at Greenspun Media Group, Vegas.com, was what I learned from a good friend of mine, how to prioritize events. The prioritization of how important something really is to respond to, when you should respond to it, how do you interact with it, how do you make sure that the customer is informed, or client, or whoever it is informed that you're looking into it. Do they need to know about it? What time do they need to know about it? And what I mean by that is, a file server goes down in the middle of the weekend, you should respond to that. If a desktop computer is a screensaver is kicking on every day at 5 o'clock, and it's just an annoyance, that can probably wait till Monday. Those type of things. It's like, but that all the way from like, every rank from regular employees to how to work with executives. That was the part that was also important, is learning how to work with executives, and what their needs are different from like everybody else.
And when you say you learned that is that something that they kind of walked you through? The reason as soon as you started saying that, I was like, man, I remember interview questions where they would do that. Something like, hey, the CEO can't print something, like a file server's down. They give you like 3 or 4 scenarios. How do you prioritize and why, right? They wanted to know your thought process. And that's not something that I think I was ever taught or kind of guided. Well, I mean, maybe indirectly, right? Because when I became a PC technician, I remember, you're kind of paired with somebody you're working around. And when I first started, they would kind of help me, like, hey, here's the tickets for the day. We got to handle this. And, you kind of follow.
This is priority. Yeah.
And he may not say, hey, it's priority, but he would just be like, hey, here's first. Here, we're going to handle it in this order. And I was just like, okay. Sometimes I would ask questions. Sometimes you just kind of follow along. And then eventually, once I felt, and probably my training partner felt, that I was competent enough to go on my own, it would be like, hey, here's the tickets. What do you want to take? And you kind of prioritize it there. But again, it was more guidance. I don't think it was like, hey, this is priority and here's why. For me, it was just more following this person and then having to process it on my own. Like, oh, I get it. Yes, the CEO can't print, but it's probably more important that food and beverage isn't working, because that's generating money. Here, he might be upset, but then when you go in there, and that's where I learned the communication, the importance of it, because then I can say, hey, I know it took a little bit longer. We had an issue in the food and beverage, and they understand, because they're like, yeah, that's making money. Customers can't pay. Yes, this is an annoyance for him, or maybe it's super important because he's at the time maybe printing out something for a meeting. So,
yeah, and I think it's yes and with that. And the reason I say is, yes, you have to prioritize. Is the printers the printing press being down for the newspaper, big deal. Printer at the CEO's desk, also a big deal. So what we would do is, okay, our team, it's about teamwork, right? Our team, like, who's got the best, who can address the printing press problem. That's not a real thing. It didn't actually happen.
Right.
But
In the scenario,
the file server being down, who can address them the best? Well, so and so can. All right. I'm going to handle the CEO's printer. I will come back and meet you to get started on the file server. And then we would just kind of we kind of figure out who could help the best play quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, just understanding everybody's strengths and weaknesses.
Who can how do we coordination?
Okay.
How do we coordinate the workload? But yeah, usually it's like, okay, I went in there, power cycle the printer. It's fine. It's good now. I'm back. What do you need me to do?
Right. Sometimes that's the answer is like, hey, this is more critical, but I know that all I've got to do it might be a 2-minute
fix. And right. And occasionally that wouldn't work the way you expect it to, but most of the time it did. Yeah, they never had a problem with the printing press, but that wasn't the thing. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun for me. I was there for a couple of years. Again, that team, I'm really so close to members of that team because it was probably the best team one of the best teams I worked with in my career, because so we all knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it was easy for us to move things around and figure out who needed to go do what. And then I went to go work for Fontainebleau Resorts the first time around, not recently. So when I talk about this is earlier on, this is when they were building it the first time. And they'd asked me to come over and work on the digital in-room compendium product, which is a iMac in every room. And so Miami Beach had an iMac in every room, and they wanted someone to come in and take over that project, and I did. And that was a heck of a lot of fun, because basically I got to use all the skills I had yet again and help them build out a product that worked well in the rooms. And then I got to tie into the conference. I got to do the conference rooms, so all the conference room displays. I got hooked into a system that we built with a web development company that did multi-channel marketing. So we actually had the iMacs, the Wayfinders, which is the interactive screens, the conferencing rooms systems, tied into one system did the website too. And so it was just so much fun to do that. I got to go to Miami Beach quite a bit.
And by this point, right, so you've had a number of roles. It sounds like, you found a specialty. Was that a conscious decision, or was it something as you kind of got in these roles, became very proficient in it, it was something that just kind of naturally lent itself? It
was natural. Okay. Yeah, it felt like a natural lift, because it was just like everything. I was like, oh, cool, they're looking for someone to do this. I can do that. I can, that's what I do.
So you didn't go into it thinking like, I'm going to be the Mac specialist.
No, it was more of like, okay, they're looking for somebody to do it was digital media engineer was the name of the title. Look for somebody digital. It was more than just the Apple stuff. It was supposed to be more of a whole slew of things. But that ended in with, the Miami property declared bankruptcy. Oh, sorry, not Miami, I apologize. Las Vegas property declared bankruptcy. I ended up supporting the Miami solution for quite some time after that. And then at some point, I think it was, my daughter was born in 2011. So right after that, I ended up getting laid. I think it was like got laid off basically from there. But 4 or 5 months later, I had spent a lot of time with my daughter at the house, which was great because she was a newborn, and it was good. They were good times. But I got a phone call from I kept in touch with the ownership of the Greenspun Corporation, and I got a chance to go back and be CTO for their media division for luxury titles. So it was called Niche Media Green Gale Publishing. And we had several, I think it was 12 regional magazines across the nation, headquarters in New York, headquarters also in Las Vegas. It was dual. And this is where things get fun, because I'm not only over, Apple Enterprise technology, and I've done Windows technology for a long time as well, but I'm over the entire thing, because it was everything. So I have file servers in New York, and I've got data centers in New York, and I've got small stuff in Vegas. And funny enough, Vegas.com was still helping out with the IT for that organization, because they're a part of the whole thing. So it was kind of like a return trip for me. And I ended up helping them move things to be more self-sufficient, and not so reliant on resources in Vegas. But the first month I'm there, Hurricane Sandy hits.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And I remember sitting in my office in Vegas. They let me work out of the Vegas office and fly out there occasionally, and just watching on the Con Edison map, just substations just go offline, and I'm watching it get closer and closer and closer to where my data center was. And again, I've only been there for a month, so I was just like, so I called some people that had worked on the tech that were within the company, and we talked about some shutdown procedures. We got everything shut down, and because at that point in juncture, it was no one was going in the office anytime soon, so the next day we're completely offline. The phones are rerouted to Las Vegas because we had PBX that could do that. But email is completely offline. File servers are completely offline because I can't get to them. I mean, the building had flooded all the way. We were up on the 7th floor. The building had flooded floors below. And so I worked. So I'm like, okay, drawing. I had actually left out. So I did some web development in high school. So I bought my first car actually with proceeds from a website that I built. It was pretty cool. So I did a little bit of website business on the side for a little bit. But one of the things that I experimented with in that business was Google Workspace. It was called, I don't think it was called Workspace. It was called G Suite.
G Suite, yeah.
Yeah. And so I had access to the domain name, to the registrar for our company. So I'm like, well, I was going to move into the cloud anyway. So within, I think it was a period of a day, I had everybody's email addresses entered into Google Workspace. The MX records changed over, and we switched to Google. And they were using Meets, it wasn't called Meet back then.
It was Hangouts.
Hangouts.
Yeah.
And they were using and had Gmail up, and they were starting to get back to work, and they couldn't get to the file systems because they were offline still, but at least communication was happening. And that was probably one of the quickest adoptions I had done of Works. And a lot of people weren't doing G Suite yet. That was kind of cutting edge. And the ownership of the company had enough faith in what I was doing that, like, hey, this is going to get us to a point where we need to be today. And Google's infrastructure is still awesome. And it was good back then, too. But we were able to get the credentials out to everybody across the nation. They were able to log in and start communicating, and then at that point in juncture, think about a week or so later, power was still going out and brownouts and stuff. The ownership of the company goes, hey, we're going to fly out there. And there wasn't any flights to commercial flights. Oh, we're going to take a net jet. Okay. So I flew with them back to Teterboro, New Jersey. I think that's how you say it. I remember flying in and seeing the lights flickering on the different parts of the city in New Jersey. We get to so we get in, we get checked into a hotel. The next day we headed down to the office, go to the data center. At this point in juncture, things are starting to return to normal. Power's back on, AC and everything's back on. It's all good. We fire up the infrastructure and it all works.
So the question I have is, I know that you mentioned, early on you had like this web development experience. What in that moment, right? And maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but what made you think of that as a solution? Because again, it's not like, hey, I'm a web developer, I do this. Sure, you did it for a while. You have that knowledge and that experience, but in that moment, kind of maybe going back to that prioritization, it's like, hey, this is down. People are thinking of different solutions. That's a genius solution, right? Like, hey, we can move this. Now, granted, again, timing is perfect because there's cloud. Hey, it's early. Did you test it out?
Oh, I had domains for years with Google or G Suite.
Okay.
Various other customers, yeah.
Got it. So this is something that you had more recent experience. So it wasn't just the one time. It's just like, hey, I've done a little bit on the side, and it's not like, oh, I had to reach back 10 years worth of knowledge. It's like, oh, well, I do this for other companies. Like, hey, here's a solution. And it sounds like they had enough trust in you and confidence to say, give it a try.
Well, I had started building, hey, we might want to do this with them before all Hurricane Sandy hit. This was not it was before we even knew there was going to be a storm. I'm like, hey, let's take a look at this for our platform, because we're using Exchange Exchange on-prem.
Self-hosted.
Yeah. And we cut down licensing fees and all that stuff. And I knew how quickly I could get Google Workspace set up. There was Office Online or Office Exchange hosted solutions, but they weren't quite as like I knew I could tell, I can go to the Google G Suite and do a self setup. I didn't have to talk to anybody. And because everybody else, they were busy trying to save this, the East Coast was just a mess. So I was able to use, the self-service tools to get us up and running. Whereas if I had to do a Microsoft solution, it would have been, longer. Yeah.
The other question that kind of came out of that is, you mentioned with the Greenspun, they kind of brought you back. And maybe I've touched on it a little bit with past conversations, but moving to different roles and different organizations, you mentioned like, hey, I'm still really good friends with, everybody at that other role. How do you approach leaving roles? Like, because we mentioned, like in Southern Nevada, it is a tight-knit. It's a tight-knit community.
Yeah.
We don't, at least I didn't consciously think of like, hey, I don't want to burn bridges. Yeah. Now, at some point later on, somebody had mentioned that, like, hey, you don't want to burn a bridge. And I'm like, well, what do you mean burn a bridge? Like, to me, a lot of that corporate jargon was new to me. I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, hey, you want to leave on good terms, don't alienate yourself. I was like, that came natural to me just because of, building relationships and, meeting people. How is that something that you consciously did, or is it just kind of your nature to say, hey, I'm going to build relationships. I'm going to take pride in my work. I'm going to do well. Not that you are probably consciously thinking like at some point this person is going to come back and reach out to me, but it happens. And I have had other guests that say that, like, hey, this person reached out just, like I had Rhonda on here and she mentioned that she had somebody, yes, they worked together, but they didn't have, like, they weren't that close of a relationship to say like, oh, hey, Rhonda, hey, come over. So when this person reached out, she was just like, oh, I think you'd be great. Like, people are, I touched on this prior, is like, people are watching even when you don't think they are.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's, I always feel this, if you do your work well, and you're able to provide value, and you're just a good. I think it comes down to attitude too. I think attitude, and people remember that. They file it away, and when they're ready to move on a new project or need somebody to do something, they might go, "Hey, who do I? Oh yeah, I know that. I know someone that might be perfect for this role." And so in response to like leaving places, it's always hard. It's not something I like to do. But early on in my career at Apple, I went to a training, and the trainer is like, sometimes you have to leave where you love working to get a skill that you can't get there. And I feel that in order to develop, sometimes I had to leave where I was so I can go get skills so I could move up further in management or towards developing towards the role I wanted to be in, which is really strategy.
Right. No, that makes sense. And the other thing you mentioned about attitude, right? Like, you could be the smartest person,
but you got to be nice.
But yeah, if I can't stand you, like, I don't know that I want to work with you.
You got to be a good team player. Yeah. You can't. It's we've all worked with people that have not embodied that, and I try to embody that. As I get older, I find it's harder for me to be that way, but it might just be me getting older. But really, it comes down to it comes from the attitude. If you treat everybody with respect, everybody from holding the door open for the janitor to making sure that the same thing with I treat everybody the same way. It's not say hi to everybody. I think wasn't it Zappos that did the whole like how you treated the bus driver was the part of the interview process, I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's was part of their thing. Like they would ask the bus driver, "Hey, how was your interactions with the candidate on the bus?" Because they used to be up by us too, up there. But yeah, I think it's all about the interactions.
So then now at some point you move towards UNLV. So how did that kind of...
So, but when I was a student at UNLV, I was on something called the Student Technology Advisory Board, as I was part of the student government for a little bit there. And the CIO of the time, or she was the vice provost of information technology, is Lori Temple. And I got to hang out with her for some of these sessions about policy. I'll get into that a little bit later about policy stuff. And I got to be there for the discussion about the wireless deployment on campus. And she was really cool. And when Lisa was going through her chemo and everything like that, she kind of knew what was going on because I was missing meetings. And she was just a really cool source of, she just cared. And fast forward to, the company, the niche media, Green Gun Publishing, was eventually sold. I went off to do some enterprise Apple consulting here in town. Did that for a little while. That was a lot of fun too, because helping people. But it was also really, really busy. And I decided, hey, I want to go back to more of a desk role, or something where I can do strategic stuff and kind of figure out where I want to go next. Because I wasn't, it's one of those things where it's like, how can I develop further? Because I have a quest for knowledge, which is insatiable for some reason. I don't know what it is. It was instilled in me. I keep on learning more and more and more. And so with UNLV, a good friend of mine, who was my former boss at Greenspun, the first time around at Greenspun Media Group, was like, hey, I'm going to be posting a role for identity manager at UNLV for IT. I can't help you with it, but I have a job's posted. You should apply. I think it's a good role. And I'm like, well, who's running that still? And Lori was actually on the board still at SIM, and I was on the board at SIM as a at-large member at the time. Well, Lori's a CIO. I said, oh, I'd love to work for her again. So I applied, went through several interviews, went through the whole process. Ended up getting selected as the manager of identity and access management and middleware services for UNLV, and getting to work for my old boss again, which is it was a roundabout. It was kind of fun. It goes back to the whole connections, right?
Right.
We talked about how knowing somebody from my past and reaching out, and I got to go work for my alma mater, which is even cooler, right? So it's like I get to go help rebels have better authentication. And they had deployed this large-scale solution on campus for identity and access management, and it was SAML-based and did some things with Shibboleth for federation and stuff like that. And my whole project was basically to upgrade that, enhance it, keep it moving, plus helping out with exchanges of data at the middleware services. And I had started off with a really great team. They're still really great, and got to a point where I'm like, okay, we're getting close to the pen. I started 2018. In 2019, towards the end, we started hearing things about, hey, we all might be going to work from home because the pandemic's coming. And I had been planning on migrating, and my old boss had left for another opportunity at that point in juncture. So I was kind of there, figuring out how we're going to move that forward strategy wise. And I'm like, well, I think it's time for us to look at a SaaS-based solution for authentication. So we ended up being able to get Okta. And during the pandemic, the team and I moved all of our entire university's infrastructure, other than Active Directory, to Okta seamlessly. There's notifications about it, but honestly, the students were fine. And so during the pandemic, we moved everything, finished that up, and I think towards the end of 2020, 2021, early 2021. And then a few years later, we implemented MFA across everybody. And that's a huge cultural shift because you're asking people to not only supply username and password, but about either a token or authenticator and worked a lot with Vito, who you've had on your show before, to get that done.
And as part of that implementation, right, it's like, you mentioned it's seamless, but I'm sure, and I don't know what the timeline is, but there's a lot of planning that goes into that. And I think that's, sometimes people are just like, it's easy, right? Oh, it's Okta, it's easy to implement. It might be, but only because, again, you had inklings of it, so I'm guessing, I don't know, was it a couple months? Like, what was the planning period? Because again, I just want people to kind of understand. Some people may not, but just understand, like, projects that go smoothly. Hey, even your Gmail one, right? Like, hey, I did this in a day or something like that. There's a lot of planning, and you touched on this, like planning experience. There's a lot that goes on to get to that point. The ones that usually aren't as successful, it's because that planning's not there, or you miss something. And again, experience, and it happens relatively smoothly. I'm sure it wasn't like completely error-free. There's problems.
It wasn't, no.
But it's not as bad as it would have been without all this proper planning.
Yeah, I spent a good 4 or 5 months convincing leadership this is the way we should go. And then after that, after getting engagement going with Okta, it wasn't so much the technical problem. It's moving all these applications that are hooked up or weren't hooked up yet to the single sign-on layer, to SSO rather. And working with those partners on campus to figure out hey, we want to get you into identity and access management. Here's the benefits. You have to give them the value proposition. And then going through and figuring out which one's going to have, what impacts are going to help, which partners are going to impact the most, and what populations and audiences are going to be impacted, and then playing those out accordingly. It wasn't like a month thing. It was a multi-year project. We did finish it up in 2021, and then end up doing some more enhancements towards the end of that. But it was nice that we were all working from home at that time during the pandemic, because basically we just work on it. But it's an interesting. It was a lot of planning, a lot of listening. Back to a lot of listening and figuring out what people wanted, and working with our partners and internal partners to ensure that all the voices were being heard. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about making it seamless. We went as far as to try to mimic the interface of the older system so that people wouldn't even notice. We went through and made sure that their accounts were synced, like their passwords were synced up, so that when they went logged in, it was the same password. So realistically speaking, they didn't really notice a difference. Behind the scenes, it's a heck of a lot stronger. But yeah.
Right. It's a lot of work on your side, right? Yeah. And that's one of the good things about planning and having and working with the team is
project management's huge.
Having, for it to be seamless for the end user.
Yeah.
A lot of times from the outside looking in, you're like, oh, that must have been easy. Like, no. The easier it is for the end user, the more complicated it usually is on the back end.
Oh yeah. It's all about making sure students are we gotta make sure students are gonna be okay. They gotta be able to log into to Canvas, to LMS. They gotta be able to log into email. We can't, by the way, they use Google Workspace.
A little bit of experience.
A little bit of experience there. And they all have, in each of those partners, like, online education, Canvas, Gmail, all that good stuff, Google Workspace, they have their own administrators, and they'll just partner with them and work with them through the problem, or through how should we do this, what works best for you. And we're pretty successful for the most part, and there's always hiccups, and we work through those, and everybody gets together. But the thing I love about the Office of Information Technology, EMOV, is that when things happen, we all get together and figure it out together. There's a real sense of camaraderie on making sure we can get to get this, whatever the issue is, solved. But we're also very conscious of the fact that we need to make sure we do things the right way. Measure twice, cut once. Mm-hmm. When it comes to making, we want to be impactful, but in the right ways.
We want to remember for the good things.
For the good things, yeah. And so I did that. I worked on that worked in the identity field for about 6.5, 7 years. And then recently they asked me to take over the system engineering team, cloud system engineering team at UNLV. And it's all the rest of the infrastructure. So I'm having a blast doing that.
Going back to where you talked about, policies, you're in identity and access management. You eventually, I know at some point we talked about this, that you've got your master's. Was the identity and access management, because then again, you were asked to kind of come in. Prior to that, you were more on the Apple Enterprise. Yeah. Sure, there was some identity kind of mirroring that with Active Directory. So did that, again, it sounds like it wasn't a conscious decision, but again, it led to this role. It sounds like it's the perfect mix for you without knowing it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, with identity and access management, there's a lot of policy. User life cycle. What do they have access to? And your goal is, our goal is always zero trust. So only access the right things at the right time, and for the right amount of time, and identity proofing, all that good stuff. And so that really led me to think more about, hey, I like this. I like the policy stuff. I like the idea that I'm able to figure out what a problem is and then put together an implementation plan to solve that problem and come up with policy alternatives to build a solution. And then evaluate it after it's been deployed and iterate and fix it. I love doing that stuff. And so I was working at, I may have been still at Niche Media at this time, I think, but it may have been right after that. We had I went to a SIM meeting, and this is where it all ties back. I went to a SIM meeting, and this was when we were still meeting at the Smith Center. We used to meet at the Smith Center quite a bit. We were smaller. And we had legislature had just finished up, and the buzzword was Bitcoin. Blockchain. It was everywhere. And we had a lobbyist come in from California and present to us about what they had presented to some of the legislators, and it was just a kind of informational type of thing. And I remember, and they were like, they were basically talking about how they were doing all these presentations, and they were working with different legislators, and the lobby, official lobbyists and all that stuff. And I was sitting here going, I live here. Why aren't people from Nevada doing the consulting or doing the lobbying on behalf of technology for Nevadans?
Right.
And I really got to thinking, I'm like, how do I bridge my technology skills with some policy skills? And how do I use that for good? Because I really do care about the local community. I care about Southern Nevada. I care about all of Nevada, actually, and how we can present ourselves as better citizens of technology. So I think a term of civic infrastructure is something I always think of when I think about these type of things. And I said, okay, well, how do I? So I had just finished a master's. I think about a year later, a master's in information technology management from WGU, and I'm like, all right, so what programs are available at UNLV? I'm here. Well, there's a doctorate of public policy program that goes in depth into figuring out policy analysis to legislation to. I'm like, perfect. Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to look into. Enroll. I got accepted. I went through 3.5 years, three-ish years, 3.5 roughly of coursework plus policy capstone project, which is really kind of like your dissertation. Presented in front of a bunch of industry analysts for that presentation. I worked on my synthetic policy work at this point in juncture was on broadband in Nevada. I think broadband access is a key part of ensuring that our citizens have access to learning, telehealth, communications. Some people wouldn't be able to communicate with the world. They didn't have some of those things. And it goes back to this is one of the reasons I get into this is, so my dad moved up north to the Elko area, but it's out in 10 acres by himself. My mom's up there too, but they have a bunch of dogs and stuff. But they built a small house up there, and cell phone signal up there is sparse.
Right. Yeah.
I think the only one up there that works is, I think it's like AT&T or something like that might work. I think it works up there. And so Dad got, I think it was one of the satellite companies, internet access to up there. And I just remember it being terrible. It was just, he had, you call him on FaceTime or something and it would just be like, oh, not even that. It was like,
Wow.
It was like, it was just, no, there's not even that. I mean, you Dad, call me on your cell phone. This isn't working. I find out that there's an internet company available up there that goes from Wells, Nevada. Okay. Uses a Ubiquity point-to-point relay to go to a solar cart with a repeater on it with solar panels, with batteries that keeps it powered out in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Going to another one that's going to a distribution node in the like the area my dad is, and then he's got a point-to-point in his house. It's 35 by 5 megabits per second. It's 5 milliseconds a month. It was relatively inexpensive for what it is. And he's got decent internet access in the middle of nowhere. This is before Starlink. Nowhere. And I thought to myself, if my dad can get internet access in the middle of nowhere off solar carts, why is it that we can't get internet access to some of the citizens that we have in Las Vegas,
Right,
that have access to infrastructure? And there's a bigger problem than just, it's a bigger problem than just, access. It's being able to pay for it, being able to all those things. So the digital, trained how to use it, those type of things. But I thought I can do some good there. So that's one of my takeaways is I'm always about pushing how to get better access for folks, for education, for telehealth. One of the things that I'm very proud of in Nevada, it's not really my thing, but I like to talk about it and try to get more people to do it, is so there's the thing called Eduroam, and it's basically an education network and research network. And the way it works is UNLV students, CSN students, I think CSN does it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know they have the network there. I'm not sure how they enroll it. UNR, et cetera, are all part. Their local identity providers talk to a federation called Eduroam Federation. As long as I have that installed, that certificate for this Eduroam network, or there's different ways of doing it, right? On my PC, Mac, iOS device, whatever it is, if that Eduroam SSID is there on the access point, you're online. Uses your home credentials, you're online securely. And so if I take my laptop where I've hooked up the Wi-Fi from UNLV and I go up to UNR and open up my laptop, I'm online. No configuration, just boom, on. If I go to Stanford, open up my laptop, I'm online. If I go to Harvard, open my laptop, I'm online. If I go to, thanks to some of the people that you've had on your podcast, I go to a facility hosted by Clark County, I'm online.
And is that...
It's best effort Wi-Fi, but...
Right, but still, but is that something that... Is it nationwide?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the percentage of... Sounds like that's primarily universities, but what's the percentage of universities that are part of this?
I don't have numbers on that with me, but I can...
Like a rough guess.
Oh, gosh. Probably 70 to 80.
Oh, wow. So it's a significant amount.
It's a lot, yeah. Okay. Not everybody has it, but one of the things I like to do is I like to partner with some of my friends up at Nevada System of Higher Education that are the Eduroam folks. Eduroam, it's like the manager of the local and state network for Eduroam. I'm good friends with him. He's been working really heavily on working with local institutions here, like organizations, to get that SSID Eduroam in more places. That means that I can take my laptop, and I'm a UNLV student, I can go to CSN, open it up, and I'm working. I mean, think about that from a coverage perspective. So, while it's not specifically broadband, it is internet access. Imagine if we were to do that with some more of our organizations, so the schools. had access, and the K through 12 has access to it as well. But CCSE doesn't do it, I don't think. But
I was just going to ask, like, is it like even like a K through 12 and stuff?
yeah,
That's amazing.
I don't think they do. Maybe they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, bringing awareness is, again, I didn't know that that's a thing. So hopefully through this, maybe they're aware, maybe there's reasons. But again, just I think the big thing, and one of the things I like about this is just bringing awareness and exposure to things that we don't know what we don't know.
And that's one of the things through SIM, I talk to some of the CIOs that we have with some organizations, and I kind of make them aware of, hey, there's this really cool thing that's available that could really help a lot of students. And that's been successful. And I think the more awareness we have of it, again, I don't speak for Eduroam, but I just believe in it.
Right. Man, it's been a great conversation.
It's a lot.
And and good, right? Like a lot of good, interesting stories, a lot of good takeaways that you've kind of provided. You've answered a lot of the questions that came up that I had. Apart from this Educase or Educause?
Eduroam.
Eduroam. Sorry, as part of Eduroam, is there anything else that you kind of want to bring up? Maybe something that we briefly touched on or something we haven't covered that you think is, hey, this is something else that I want to make sure that is covered or addressed?
Well, I should probably talk about SIM Nevada. Probably.
Sounds good. I mean, I know a couple people.
I might be the chair.
They might say, hey,
why didn't Bob would call me? Yeah. SIM Nevada is a great organization. I know you're part of SIM. And we just rebranded from SIM Las Vegas to SIM Nevada. So now we have the north part of the state. So we have lots of folks from Reno, from Carson. I've seen some other, Douglas County was in there too. I mean, there's some great folks joining the organization. We're over 100 members. What a great, we've got networking to talk, talking about common issues that we all have, to the educational scholarship area of SIM Nevada, which has gotten to be huge because of the golf tournament, which is an amazing event of the year. I love being able to Bob does most of the planning on that. I just kind of work with the government side of the house, but it gives me a golf cart to drive around on, which is kind of cool. Last year Zenius and I drove around with Frank Sinatra playing, but and it's such a great organization. And there's lots of other great organizations also in Vegas that are coming to be more mature now, like we work. So I've been on the board for 10 years, been a member for 12. It started in 2014 with Joe Marcella. It was a former CIO for the city of Las Vegas. And I still talk to Joe. He's a good guy. It's amazing watching the progress, because I was there when we were, we were 30 or 40 members, and we went down to lower than, I think, 12 during the pandemic, because it was hard. No one wanted to be on a Zoom call and then now we're back up to over 100, because the community has just caught fire.
Right.
And I'm so proud of the organization for what it's been able to do.
And you're right, and they're doing a lot of good, and I think they're bringing attention. And again, there's a number of other organizations as well, right? ISSA and all these other things. And one of the things that I see is there's groups popping up, and I think because of the success and a lot of what SIM and some of these other groups are doing, there's people that are part of multiple groups.
Oh, yeah.
Again, that's the other thing I like, and I've gone to some of these other ones, and you run into a lot of the same people, but then also different people, because, hey, I'm a security person. I've attended one or two of those, but that's not my area. But still, I know about it. I'm aware. I still know some of the same people. SIM has the new thing, and that is only, as far as I know right now, within Nevada, is the Aspiring Leaders Group.
Yes.
Right, so then these groups pop up,
Yeah.
and because there's a need, and I think they're starting to see that, hey, there's a big IT community, and I know that SIM is kind of supposed to be the bridge between a lot of these, and there's part of that going on, but at the same time, there's also like, hey, I have this particular need or area. So, for example, two friends of mine have started a security and cigars types of events.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And I showed up, and there's like 80 people that showed up to this event. And again, it's nice here in the community that there's a good mixture of, hey, we have this group that fits this need, but we also are part of the larger one where it's not like, oh, you're part of that group, you can't be part of SIM, or you can't be a part of ISSA, or you can't be a part of AITP. It's, well, no, you can, because each group fills a different need. And I know that there's a lot of coordination going on now to kind of help reduce some overlap so that they're not competing. We're like, oh, we're all meeting on the first Tuesday of the month. Well, no, how about you meet the first Tuesday, we'll meet the second Tuesday. Hey, maybe we'll meet the third Wednesday, and kind of go through and do it that way so that, again, maybe I can't attend the SIM one this month because of something, but I know that maybe I'll see you and a couple other people at the AITP because I am available, for that particular month.
Oh, absolutely. I think the success of SIM has also brought about some other organizations to build the confidence that, hey, they got this role and it's working great. I can build something to fill that need that I have. And one of those, for example, our former chair, Josh Levitt, started Tech Alley. The Tech Alley is huge. Yeah,
it is, and I didn't know he was part of SIM.
Yeah, he used to be the president, and he was a chair with me for quite a while on the board. And so yeah, he's a great guy too, and he started Tech Alley just because he saw a need for entrepreneurs and for startups to have a place to go meet and talk and learn skills, and we love that. I mean, the more better together, right? It's so
it is, and Bob and a couple of people have said it. Like it's a tagline, but it's also a reality, right? It is, and I'm seeing that here, and it's one of those things. Like, I don't know if it has just become more prevalent in the last couple of years, or if it's also just me being more intentional about that. Whereas before, I attended to some events, but it was very sporadic. Like, I didn't take advantage of a lot of these groups.
And then Angie Koska, who is at ISSA, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she was a board member for a long time too. I've known Angie for a long time, so we've
learned something new every day.
It's interesting to see what's happened and how things have moved. But the thing is, there's plenty of room in Vegas for everybody, and we all get along, and we're all, as you're saying, we're all starting to coordinate more because it makes sense for us to make sure people can get the maximum benefit from the groups they're attending. Yeah.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm glad you were able to come on. I'm glad this happened. And
glad to be
again,
here.
For me, meeting people, like, again, you and I have talked, we have some ideas, but again, I think this just gives us a dedicated kind of platform to do this. And then it's also, you're able to share this with more people. And I didn't realize the amount of information, like, hey, you mentioned Angie was a board member. And even with some of these, I've talked to people and they're like, I've known Jesse for 10 years and I didn't know that he worked here, or he did this. So again, it doesn't happen in general conversation. Again, not that you're withholding information, but it's just like that topic never came up. Yeah. So it's nice that someone is an outsider who doesn't have all this context. I'm like, well, what about this and this? And, it just comes up as part of the conversation. So thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh, I had something else and thought left. Yeah. So again, thanks for coming on. And again, I appreciate, you sharing your experiences with
me. Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
All right. And for everyone that continues to watch, listen, and support, again, thank you for taking the time to listen and learn from other people. And hopefully, you're able to take away actionable advice that you can implement as part of your own career journey. And also, if you run into these people, you have hopefully a little bit more of a connection so that you can start a conversation. So continue to plug in and download the knowledge. And until next time, thank you.